series today called Connecting the Dots. In this, we have two scholars here, Dr. Madhura Datta and architect Smitashri Swain. We also have our co-coordinator Brijeshwari. So Dr. Madhura Datta is director at banglanatak.com. She has 18 years of global work experience, starting from UNESCO to working with the at local level. She has her PhD from Tata Institute of Social Science, Mumbai, and she also is a Commonwealth scholar. May I now request Dr. Madhura Datta to start her presentation.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Madhu. And thanks for giving us a platform to share our model and experiences. So I would like to share the screen. Can you see my screen?
Yeah.
One second. Just a minute. So my presentation today will be on rural cultural tourism in Bengal, and I will be taking you through some of the case studies and also the impact that it has created. Yeah. Yeah. So you can share my see my screen, right?
It's good, Madhura. Go ahead.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. So why can't I change? Okay. So just to give a small background of us and what we do before I get into the case study. So banglanatak.com is the trading style. Our not-profit organization is contact-based. We are a social enterprise working across India with a mission to foster pro-poor growth and sustainable development using culture-based approaches. And we have an advisory status to UNESCO 2003 ICH committee. We are a global partner of UNWTO for promoting responsible and cultural tourism. We are also a national partner of UNESCO New Delhi for rolling out Art for Life, the program or the model, which I'm going to talk about. So the Art for Life methodology that we have has three main pillars. One is safeguarding art and traditional art forms and craft forms. The second pillar that we have is about empowering artists by building their technical capacities and business capacities. And finally, we rebrand the villages as cultural hubs. So for us, it is a very composite approach where we look at not only one or two artists, but the village as a whole, and look at overall community development through culture-based approaches. Now, I thought it would be pertinent to start with this very recent quote, which is also triggered by the COVID-19 pandemic. I'll just read it out. Sustainability must no longer be a niche part of tourism, but must be the new norm for every part of our sector. This is one of the central elements of our global guidelines to restart tourism. It is in our hands to transform tourism, and that emerging from COVID-19 becomes a turning point for sustainability. Now, parallel to this, I would like to refer to some of the key elements that we have been working with and we have been following through our Art for Life methodology. And we are not a tourism company or specializing in tourism per se, but I think it is important that I highlight these points because that aligns to these current developments in approaches and outlooks. So first is local tourism. Second is rural cultural destinations. Third is importance of domestic tourists. Fourth is community-led cultural tourism, which is owned, managed, and run by the communities. And then equitable partnership. So it is not that the community is a product. The community is a partner and a key stakeholder to the main process of tourism. So I will come to why I'm saying healing through localized approach, but we really sort of believe in this, that it is a process of healing through localized approach, and we are seeing that more and more during the COVID pandemic and now after 2020. So because there's a Bengal case study, just to give you the numbers, we work with 25,000 artists, 30 art and craft forms across Bengal, and 20 indigenous community-led cultural tourism destinations. So what we have been doing is we started working in these cultural hubs from 2004 and 5. And as the program evolved through the years, we found that the approach of developing an entire village is very well integrated with development of a cultural tourism destination. So from 2012-13, the activation of these cultural hubs into local tourism destinations began for us, and we learned and built the capacity, infrastructure, etc. over time, and we continued to promote the local tourism. However, it remained a niche tourism and was not in the focus of mainstream tourism industry. It did not come into that. But interestingly, the COVID pandemic led the industry to look at more sustainable and responsible tourism opportunities in the new normal that we are all sort of seeing around and realizing. So what happened was, because these cultural hubs were ready and they had a very severe impact on their livelihoods because of COVID 2020, like it happened across India, when we were trying to promote these villages, we were very fortunate to have Incredible India partner with these cultural hubs. So Incredible India started with a very intensive and a very strong campaign on these cultural hubs, the small squares that you can see with different names of different places. Though this is taken from the Incredible India Weekend Getaways website, and they started promoting this independently through various tour operators and tourism stakeholders. And this whole thing happened during December to January, and it has a huge impact on the livelihood and sustainable development of the local communities and the local villages in totality. So I'll start, because the outcomes are quite exciting considering the current situations all around us. I'll start with the outcomes and then come to the methodology. So one of our, I'll give you some highlights. One of our cultural hubs, or one of the village destinations, is Pingla, which is a Patachitra village in Midnapur district. And January has not ended, and since December, they have had 6,000 plus visitors and over 8 lakh of sales in the village. Now, these are not the visitors who are coming from different parts of India. These are the visitors who are local, who are domestic, who are coming from around that village, from the small cities close to the village. So it is a very, very local domestic tourism. Maybe from Calcutta, a few people or a few hundreds are traveling on the weekends, but it is mainly and majorly a local tourism and a city, attracting city audience for the cities which are close by. Similarly, you can see the Bikna, it is a Dokra village, again, branded that way, built that way with leadership of the community. They had 3,500 plus visitors and 16.5 lakh sales over this period. In the Terracotta Village, which is Panchmura, we had 1,500 plus visitors and more than 3.5 lakh sales. Now, these are things that we have come to know, but there is always a ripple effect happening where they are getting more orders, more people are coming, and that is a continuous process. I've just culled out a few data to share here to sort of give an indication of how local tourism is picking up. This is a Chau village in Purulia where we have seen 3,000 plus audience, and again very local. Chorida is a village of Chau mask. It is a very active craft hub, and initially in Chorida they were not even considered as a craft. They were a sub industry to Chau dance because they made the masks. But today, I mean, they are a very ready cluster and doing very good business. Over the last 2 months, they have had 60,000 plus visitors and approximately 46.5 lakh sales. Sundarban is a very attractive destination, but here what we have initiated are the participation and the active role of the local community. So it is very usual that Sundarban gets a lot of visitors, and now they are getting as well. In Birbhum, it is again to some extent a niche thing for the baul singers, but we have seen 300 plus visitors coming, and all these are going on. Similarly, we have a cluster of wooden doll, and there is a beautiful theater village in a place in Bardhaman called Tepantor. So everywhere we have seen footfalls of tourists, very positive vibe, and some kind of economic turnaround for the village hubs. Now, again, what happened along with that, again, is that we partnered with British Council, and British Council supported a 3 days festival, which is basically on celebrating International Year of Creative Economy for Sustainable Development, which is the year 2021. And here it was a 3-day festival, mainly to, again, activate the whole economic conditions through a festival mood. And what happened was that we again found that there were again a lot of developments happening. There were 100 plus artists who participated, and we also streamed that online. The artists streamed those online themselves, and we also did on our social media. So that outreach also helped hugely in feeling, you know, included with the world artists and audience and others, which made a lot of difference, especially in this kind of a situation. So now this was the impact, and this is why I started with the whole thing of healing through culture-based approach, because it gives you an emotional support, and we are talking more and more of well-being. It creates a well-being because it is a collective working together, and it definitely brings economic and social empowerment, which we have been seeing now in the post-COVID situation and the COVID situation. So what has been our methodology quickly? So as I said, that we focus on safeguarding art. So cultural mapping, inventorying, then heritage awareness and education. This is very important for us and critical, because it is important that we are able to sort of build the intrinsic value of the art and the craft forms of traditional artists, about which there is very, very low awareness. We don't know what exists around us in our own cultural diversity. So that is a very important component. And because most of these are oral traditions, documentation is another important component to not only to archive, but also to disseminate to people and increase awareness. Empowering artists, it's a mix of skill transmission from the senior artists to the younger generations, design development, and business intelligence development, business skill development, and institution building. So there are different models that we have tried out because culturally each and every hub is different, but institutionalizing the whole village as a collective identity of the traditional art form has been significant in taking the entire destination approach forward. Finally, developing the villages as cultural hubs, some of the key components that have are village festivals. We started designing village festivals initially since 2009-10, and it became very successful because it attracted a lot of tourists and visitors, both local and from outside. And the artists also sort of felt the need to develop their village as a destination. So, for example, if you enter the Patachitra village, it looks like an art village. All the houses are painted, everywhere there are paintings hanging or people sitting and working on their own paintings on a daily basis. So that really helped. And here the capacity of the communities were also built to be able to lead and manage those festivals. So those festivals were not ours. The festivals were owned and led by the community, and we have been facilitating that and supporting their capacities to do that. The other very interesting thing is we could build folk art centers in the village. So inside the village, there is a folk art center, which is again built on the community's land, and it is owned and managed by the community. And these village folk art centers, we have about 11 community museums in each of these folk art centers. So this is a matter of tremendous pride for the artists, because whenever visitors go, they can visit anytime. It is free, and artists take a lot of pride in, showing the visitors around. It talks about the history, the evolution, the legends of those art forms, the process, and then it provides a beautiful space for practice, exchange, collaboration, etc. And we have always promoted cultural exchange and collaboration because that gives a tremendous exposure to the artists to take their work, their business forward. So a few quick case studies. As I said, the village of the scroll painters. Here, when we started, there were not even 20 active artists and nobody knew the village. Today, it is one of the most sought after local creative destinations, at least in Bengal and in Calcutta. And there are 250 plus active artists and several women entrepreneurs who are traveling all over the world today and taking decisions of developing their own village. This is Gorbhanga. This was a very, very marginalized village, ostracized in many ways. And today it has become an international village music tourism destination. So people visit all the time to collaborate, to listen, to stay in the village and work with the artists, etc. This is interesting. This is a Katha embroidery collective. When we started, you can see the woman on the left. Her name is Tajkira. And when we started, she was the only sort of striving artist who was trying to make a living for herself with Katha. And she, with her leadership, not only participated and got involved in our whole project process, but also with her leadership could bring in more women who were not doing anything, who did not have their own independent livelihood, and who were completely marginalized in the village, to come forward and use their Katha skills to build their own livelihood. And today, I would call her a social entrepreneur, and there are 600 plus women in the village who earn their daily living from this craft. They take decisions about their children going to school, health, village development, etc. So these are the some of the pictures of the folk art centers and the community spaces. Village festivals, as I said, there are today about 20 village festivals happening, and that has increased the recognition and the identity of the villages so much that we have seen that there is a round the year footfall happening then, because it just gets promoted by more and more visitors coming in. So we have a calendar of festivals, because then people know that it's not just a one-off event, and today the artists, the village artists and the community actually promote their festivals themselves and lead those themselves. Engaging tourists in heritage activities is a common thing, but we have done that also because we understand that it's a major way to create value and appreciation for not only the art form but also the artists, because they hold tremendous scientific skills. I mean, so we do workshops, say for example, making Shola products, or learning how to make natural colors, and using those natural colors to learn how to paint Patachitra, and also for performing arts, similar activities. This is something that we have also promoted, because we found that when we have brought a lot of international groups wanting to collaborate with other folk groups to the villages, not only has the artists gone out to the international places, the international people have come to the villages and performed. So that has created a tremendous exposure for the artists in the village, and it has created aspirations for them to, you know, upgrade and develop their village in a way that they can really become good sort of hosts for these kinds of collaborations and events. So as these cultural tourism destinations have sort of grown, we have seen very strong local recognition, very strong pride and identity. These artists had left their art forms. They were menial laborers. They used to do daily wage laborer jobs, and they are back into their own profession. Not only that, the younger generations have started involving in these art forms for their livelihood, because they see opportunity and growth in these industries. And it is very important that, I mean, instead of migrating out to the cities and doing menial labor jobs where there's no respect, no money, and we have seen what has happened during COVID-19, this whenever they have seen that this kind of opportunity has been built and it is there, they have come back to the village, and they have been extremely happy to be in their village and on their very respectful and dignified livelihood. We have also promoted geographical identification. We have facilitated that, and we have promoted that. Also, UNESCO list of ICH, representative list of ICH, and logos and identity creation, because the visual identity creation has been very important, because there are products, there are performances, there are groups. So identifying them with something very local has been important, and geographical indication has helped us and helped them create immense value and branding for their own villages. And the larger impact is, it is not only these artists and the villages, because the local tourism has grown, it has energized the entire area. So there are youth who are coming into business of hospitality, in transport, in logistics. So it has become a very vibrant place. And it is not only the artists who paint or make or perform, it is also the communities around who have found various income opportunities to come forward and make this local tourism more and more strengthened. Definitely, technology is something that we had been sort of integrating with their tourism, but COVID-19 has sort of taken this use to a different level, and we are all even now adapting to it, understanding it. So it was very difficult, and it was not enough, because we know the amount of digital divide that exists, but we could even then sort of try and build the capacity of the artist to a certain extent. And because the young people who are now all going to school, they are educated, but they are in the same craft industry, they have smartphones and they are more sort of easy with technology, we could easily orient them on Zoom, on going live on Facebook, on promoting their own Facebook pages and things like that. And that they have been doing wonderfully once they have got a hang of how to do it. But this has been going on through 2020. And I think more than anything else, the fact that they could reach out even while sitting in their own village houses has been a very, very important component of keeping their hopes up and supporting their emotional conditions for being able to retrieve when things get a little normal. As I sort of said in the beginning, that when Incredible India or the other things happened, it was much easier for them to participate. So if I look at the outcomes and impact, then for the community-based cultural tourism, what has been the development impact? Poverty alleviation, improved income, improved lifestyle, quality of life, education for children, gender equality, social inclusion. So I think it is sort of appropriate to say that it is possible to bring a shift in paradigm and linking tourism to overall sustainable development goals, what we are talking about today. So we have sort of been able to address SDG 1, which is no poverty, SDG 5, gender equality, SDG 6, clean water and sanitation, because there is aspiration, because there is hope, because they are positive, they are building their village, they are ensuring water is clean, health is okay, they have sanitation everywhere. So these have become, we have not worked for those, but through the process, these have automatically come in and the communities have taken charge of those. SDG 8, decent work and economic growth, and SDG 11, which we would say has considerably reduced migration, almost stopped migration to cities, and have created very, lucrative industry spaces for these cultural and creative hubs. So I will stop here and I'll be happy to answer questions later. Thank you.
Madhu, I think you're on mute.
Thank you, Madhura. Thank you for your presentation. It is really effective and I would say truly beautiful with a lot of colors and a lot of value. And I will now invite architect Smita Shri for the next presentation. Architect Smita Shri has done her master's in urban planning from IIEST Shivpur. She is presently doing her PhD from NIT Raipur. So, Architect Smita, you can start your presentation.
Good evening, Madhura ji. Good evening, everyone. Good evening, ICOMOS, for giving us such a good platform to share our opinion and views. So, first, let me share my screen. Yeah, I will be discussing about cultural tourism and sustainable development, and my case study is from Odisha. So, firstly, when we are talking about cultural tourism, we must understand what do we understand by culture. So basically, culture as defined or as described by Edward P. Teller, that it is a complex whole that includes knowledge, belief, law, art, moral, and all the capabilities and habits acquired by human and as a member of the society. So basically, culture is a powerful tool which is necessary for the survival, but it is very fragile by phenomenon. So it keeps on changing and easily get lost because it only exists in our mind. The language, the script, the religious practice, the custom, the rituals, whichever is followed, is not the culture itself. It is basically merely a product of culture. So culture is a very delicate thing which we need to preserve for our upcoming generations. Now, coming to cultural tourism, as defined by UN World Tourism Organization, is it is a type of tourism activity in which the visitor's essential motive is to learn, discover, and experience and consume the tangible, intangible cultural attraction of a destination. So this can be in the form of art, architecture of that area, of that destination. It can be the intellectual, spiritual, emotional feature of a certain society. It can be music. It can be the cultural heritage. It can be the living culture. Anything, everything comes under this the tangible and intangible cultural heritage. So now, coming to my topic, I will be now discussing about the cultural tourism in Odisha. In this discussion, I will share that what is the current scenario of cultural tourism in Odisha, or in fact, we can say tourism in Odisha, and how, with the help of cultural tourism, we can further increase the scope of tourism industry in the state. So Odisha is basically eastern state in India with 500-kilometer long coastline. It has numerous number of lakes, natural biodiversity. It has a wide range of wildlife reserves, beach, temple, monument. So, and in Odisha, it has the tourism has a significant contribution in the economy of the state. In year 2019, the tourism has contributed 15,720 crore in the economy of the state. So now if we see some data regarding the tourism of the state, so in the highest tourism of India, we can say the highest footfall is in Uttar Pradesh, which is around 23.1% as per 2019 data. Unfortunately, 2020 data is not available because of this pandemic. So 2019, Uttar Pradesh has the highest score, and Odisha was in 20th position. If I compare Odisha with the top 10 performing states, here lies the Odisha. So here by this graph itself, we can understand Odisha has to look forward to gain momentum to reach climb so that it can attract further more tourists. So if we see the footfall of tourism to tourists in Odisha. So in year 2000, the footfall of tourists in Odisha was around 1 crore 56 lakhs 23,000. So if we see that this the footfall of tourists, if we analyze that where they are actually, is this tourism helping the entire state? Are the tourists coming and whatever they're contributing, the economy and everything, is it availed by each and every district of the state? Because Odisha has 30 districts, but the graph suggests that no, it is limited to very few cities or very few districts, I can say, namely Puri, Bhubaneswar, Baleswar and Cuttack. Only Puri and Bhubaneswar contribute 40% of total tourist footfall. So now talking about what are the major tourist destinations which currently attract tourists, or which has created an image in the tourism industry is yes. So here is the density map. Here also we can see that the number of the density of tourism is only high around this region, which is Puri, Khorda, Cuttack. So the density is high here only, and if you see other districts, it's very less. So now talking about what are the major tourism destinations till now where the tourists are attracted. So first comes the Puri. It is the adobe of Lord Jagannath. So attraction is definitely, it's a faith tourism. Lakhs and lakhs of people visit the temple. They visit the cart festival. Even they enjoy the golden beach of Puri. The next is the Konark, which is again an architectural marvel. It's a UNESCO heritage site. So people do visit here to experience this marvel. They even lots of visitors do visit the Konark festival, which is held once in a year, which display lots of cultural activities. The tangible, intangible heritage has been displayed beautifully in this heritage, in this festival. Then is Bhubaneswar. Bhubaneswar is basically a temple city. It has enormous it is filled with it is having wide variety range of temples like Lingaraj temple, Rajarani temple. Then it has even caves like of Jaini architecture like Udaygiri and Khandagiri. Even Buddhist architecture like Buddhist architecture of this Dhauligiri. We can say in Bhubaneswar the temple city. Then proceeding to then another ancient city which attract tourists, basically domestic tourists, I can say, is the Cuttack. It is 1,000-year-old city. Here people look for the Barbati Fort. It is the ruins of Barbati Fort. Even this is a silver city. People visit during Durga Puja to experience or to look for the silver pandal of goddess Durga. It is the birthplace of Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose. Fortunately, today is Netaji's birthday as well. So it is also one of the major tourist attraction. Along with that, Bali Yatra is a major festival which attracts thousands of people, but it is all from the Odisha, mostly from people from the Odisha. Then next, certain art and craft villages have also attracted tourism. These are Raghurajpur, which is nearby to Puri. So it is famous for its Patak Chitra. Tourists do go there, visit there. It is a very, and it is also, it has got lots of recognition because of its art and culture. And its tourism has a great contribution to give recognition to this place. Then is another Pipli. It is very well known for its Alpiq handicraft. It is on the way to Cuttack Bhubaneswar, sorry, Puri Bhubaneswar. So tourists do visit here, and this colorful Alpiq walk attract lots of tourists here as well. Apart from this, there is a very new destination. This is which attract tourists is the Sand Festival of Puri. It attracts lots of tourists as well. Now, these are what I have discussed. These are very known common destination of Odisha. Now, I will also discuss about the lesser known or very less popular, we can say, lesser known cultural heritage of Odisha, which has the tremendous potential to attract more tourism in the coming decades. So, let's have a look on that as well. So first is the Buddhist ruin, and we have tribal heritage, we have rural tourism, we have scope of rural tourism, we have enormous festival and events. So Buddhist, even though Gautam Buddha never visited Odisha, but his first disciple, Tapasi and Bhalika, hailed from Odisha. So Buddhism is in practice. Buddhism is been a predominant religion in Odisha region during 6th to 10th century. And it continued till 15th century. Even though tourism was there, even Buddhism was there in Odisha before the Kalinga War, but it got its wing after Ashoka adopted Buddhism. So, during this period, countless stupa and monasteries were built, which have been found across the state, and around 200 significant Buddhist sites has been identified by the state. So we have one of the Buddhist circuit is the Diamond Triangle, which is basically Ratnagiri, Udaygiri, and Lalitgiri. The word Diamond Triangle is by the famous Chinese traveler Huang Tisang. In his chronicle, he has referred Diamond Triangle as one of the place of Puspokoi. Puspokoi is basically Pushpagiri University, which was at par to the Nalanda of that time. So somewhere there is a mystery laying behind that this Puspagiri was somewhere in this golden triangle. So one first is the Ratnagiri. Ratnagiri has one of the places Ratnagiri. This Ratnagiri was built in 1st century, and it has lots of the ruins of Ratnagiri even is now well preserved. We can see it has got very beautifully ornate doorways with delicate carving, and it has colossal head. It has a number of around 27 colossal head, which has been now in museums and all. And again, it has a set of votive stupas. So this is large number of Buddhist sculptures are there in this site for the lover of art and architecture. The second is Udayagiri in this in this circuit. So in this Udayagiri, it has the sites the remains of a huge monastic complex of big stupa. So it has two big monastery, massive shrine complex, and a step well, and a large number of rock cut sculptures are present in Udayagiri. Next is, yeah, it is the entrance of the brick stupa. So then next is Lalitgiri, same, it is having lots of ruins. It is also believed that it is one of the oldest Buddhist complex, and it is also during excavation, a gold casket was found, and with some bone relics. It is believed that it belongs to Gautam Buddha himself. So in this way, there are also various sites. These are some of the significant sites I discussed. Then another is Langudi Hills. Here it is believed that Gautam Buddha has changed his mind, or has converted from Chanda Ashok to Dharma Ashoka, or from Digvijay to Dharma Vijay. So this place we can find many stone inscriptions, which is believed that was written by the emperor himself. So apart from this Buddhist, we have also a larger chunk of tribal heritage in Odisha. Looking at the tribal population, the state has the third highest percentage population of tribal population of the country. It has 62 different tribal communities spread over the over 36 districts. So this tribal population basically constitute around 23% of the total population. So when we see this tribal population, these people there are very few people still left in the entire world who are still using that ancient way of living. Basically, most of the people are now in the mainstream. So similar, so these tribal heritage of this Odisha has the capacity to provide a unique experience to the tourist around the globe. So these tribal people are more dependent on the natural heritage, dependent on the nature, on the forest for the food, for living. They live in small community. Mostly they are very conservative by nature. They don't they don't prefer to interact more with the outsider because of the cultural differences. So these people are very rich in their cultural identity, and they express their identity in the form of their rituals, festivals, dance forms. So their cultural identity, their cultural heritage can very well be seen with their dressing pattern, their ornaments, their art and craft. So in Odisha, if you see the tribe, there are many tribes which has mentioned in our epics also, Hindu epics, starting from Mahabharata and Ramayana, like this Gadava, they have been mentioned in Ramayana era. And if you talk of Suras, they have been mentioned in Mahabharata. So there are tribes like Bonda, which have unique culture, they have unique sense of dressings. And if we talk about Suraras, they are very artistic. So in this way, these 262 tribal community are very distinct from each other, and they have something new to contribute. They have something new indigenous characteristics. So now they celebrate their festival, celebrate a lot. During this festival, they dance, they do interesting rituals. So, and even they are masters. Some of the tribal community are very good in painting as well. We can see this Surara woman is doing some painting work, which is very much looks like Varli, but it is not Varli. It is quite different than Varli painting. This is one of the Bonda tribal painting. In this way, the tribal heritage of Odisha is very unique, and it has the potential to provide a very unique experience to the outsider. When the traveler or when a tourist visit these little villages in the valley, their age-old tradition, the weekly market, the amazing hike on the spectacular landscape, or the drum beat during the evening as they dance to the tune of the damesa. Damesa is their drum, typical drum. It can be a lifetime experience for a tourist. Next is the rural Odisha. If we talk about rural Odisha, as we know, India is a land of villages, and villages symbolize the true spirit of our country. So Odisha itself comprises of around 54,000 villages, and the 83% of Odisha's population is rural. So the rural region of Odisha is rich and unique in its cultural tradition. So every region is characterized by a distinctive occupation, way of living, their social pattern, their beliefs, their rituals. Everything is very distinctive. Every region has something new to offer. So here we can see the way they're living, that their daily work, everything, everything, their heritage, their social values, it is reflected in their day-to-day activity, day-to-day living style. So in this way, even we can see the festivals of Odisha, though which are very unique by nature, I can say, because the people are basically some of the festivals which are followed by household level, which are household level, maybe a Manavasa Gurubar or a Sambar Dasmi Puja. These are very much practiced at home, but there are certain festivals which is being followed, which has been celebrated by the entire community. For example, is the Kartik Purnima, where people sail this paper boat, to remark the rich trade culture of our ancient Odisha. Even Odisha has a very some unique festival as well, like Raja Parva. It is a 3-day celebration. It is a celebration of womanhood, which is a very unique kind of festival. Apart from that, we have Sheetal Shashti Jata, Jola Jatra. These are some of the festivals which I am sharing with you. When we are talking about festival, every festival is marked with certain mythological event and again followed by certain folk dance. So this kind of folk dance is been practiced in many festivals like Chau dance in Chau Jatra, Goda Nacha, Paika Nacha, and one of the very famous form is Sambalpuri dance. It's been practiced by the local community during their festival, and these festivals are followed up with the traditional cuisine. So these traditional cuisine are distinctive for are different for every festival. So in this way, it is evident that Odisha has a lot many unique things has the potential to give a very unique experience to the tourist, not only domestic, but the outsider, maybe outside the state as well as outside the country. So now when we're talking about tourism and sustainable development, then we have to discuss about the impact of tourism. So as Madhura ji now discussed about the impact, definitely tourism contributes to the economy. It provides the employment opportunity. It brings new facility and infrastructure to the region. One of the very big example is Puri Jagannath Dham. It was before it was like that, but now because of this tourism activity taking place, so the local authority or the government has decided to make it a world-class heritage city. So in this way, the facility and the facility infrastructure, it upgrade the entire region. So next is it promotes the local business. It showcases the region in a positive light. People outside know about us, know about our community, our culture, and it can enhance the local pride, the cultural pride among the host community. A very good example of it is Raghurajpur. Here, in each and every person or each and every individual of this village work on this Patachitra work. In this Patachitra art is a Patachitra artist, because they know because of tourism, the pride of their community, pride of the community on their culture has enhanced. So now they're proud of their village and they're proud of what they are doing. So this is one of the very good example of tourism promoting the cultural heritage of a region. Again, tourism, when there is positive impact, definitely there is negative impact as well. So when we are taking out negative impact, one of these over dependency on tourism, especially in this pandemic situation when there was no tourism, definitely the community was totally dependent on tourism, must have suffered. So apart from that, one of the very big negative impact we can say is the conflict due to cultural differences, the exploitation of vulnerable section, because the tribal people now we are talking about the rural population. They are very innocent because they are not very much familiar with the complex system of outside world. So it is very easy to exploit them. So this is one of a very negative impact which can affect the harmony and tranquility of the region. And at times it has been noticed that there are these people, especially the tribal people, are even objectified. I have one example from Odisha itself, that in year 2012, one incident came into light that a tourism operator was was actually advertising internet about for attracting tourists. He was displaying the tribal people. And what was his package? His package was including this entertainment from these tribal ladies, these ladies which they wear their traditional clothes, which may be very maybe different for us, but it is their traditional cloth. So the basically the tourism operator was advertising this thing. So this came into notice by the government or as well. Then action was taken. Even if we see the video also, many Jwara women whose traditional dress, they're semi-naked because their dress is like that. We can find those also in the videos. So there was a consequence of it in year 2012 itself, because this area the Maoist activity is predominant. They abducted two Italian tourists, and they demanded a complete tourist ban in the region. So this is a very big, and after that tourism was banned in that region. So it is a very big example that how unplanned or improper or insensitive approach towards tourism can affect the entire region, can affect the host community as well as the entire region. Now here comes the role of responsible tourism. So what is responsible tourism? So responsible tourism is defined in World Summit on Sustainable Development is that making better place for people to live in and better place for people to visit. So responsible tourism, it includes all the stakeholders like operator, hotelier, government, local people, tourists, even the self-help group to take the responsibility to take action to make tourism more sustainable. In this image, we can see this is representing the local community, and this is the tourist. So it is saying treat local people well and find they return the favor. How they will return the favor? They will return the favor that they will let you in a little into their life and their culture. So what will happen at the end? We will have the rewarding experience of their life and their culture, and they will definitely get benefit as a cultural pride or our appreciation or maybe financial benefit. So definitely if this responsible tourism will definitely end up in win-win situation. So basically, what is the main highlighting aspect of responsible tourism is that it minimizes the negative economic, environment, and social impact. It looks for community participation. It looks for the greater economic benefit of the host. It provides memorable experience for the tourist with a meaningful connection with the local community. It excuse me. It works on cultural sensitive approach so that both the community respect each other, the tourist and the local community develop respect for each other, they respect each other's culture, and it builds pride and confidence in the host community, which is basically the aim of sustainable tourism development. So now I will talk about best practice. One of the best practice which has been practiced in Odisha is by Sarana Travels. So what they do, they work on the revival of Odisha's indigenous culture and heritage through its sustainable tourism model. So crafted on the principle of tourism development, they have already worked on Kandhamal district in Odisha under the name of Sathi Ghara, and they are initiating tourism project in Satkoshia around Mahanadi. So what they are doing, they are facilitating their work as a catalyzer between the local community and the tourists, and they work on education-based tourism. They educate the local community as well as they educate the people who are there for the tourism, so that a better understanding between these two exists. So they work on reviving the dying art and culture, implementing the idea of sustainable development. They empower the local community by community participating them, by giving them employment opportunities such as organizing by introducing local food, dance, culture troupe. In this way, the local community is getting employment and cultural and economic benefit. So they create market linkage and branding of local agro product and art and craft. So the co-founder of Sarana Travel is Mr. Jitu Mishra ji. Here are some of the pics how he's dealing with the tourist and the local community, and how he's promoting the education-based tourism, or a more sensitive approach towards the tourism, and how it's educating local community as well as the tourist. So some of the image here which is self-explanatory. Yeah. So next, another example from Odisha is Desia. They work on also responsible tourism in Odisha. So, and they work on preserving the rich tribal culture of Odisha, Odisha festival, local ritual, and local cuisine. And they showcase the even in this responsible tourism, they take the community participation as a key factor. They, and with the help of community participation, they have transformed the entire tourist that destination into a tourist hotspot. And for this effort, they have been won a national tourism award. So he is the founder, Yoga Brata Kara, displaying artwork of tribe community. So in this way, I like to conclude my presentation that with this note that Odisha is a multi-destination state. It has unique cultural diversity. It has tremendous potentiality to attract domestic as well as foreign tourists, and can provide them a lifetime travel experience. At the same time, the vulnerability of the cultural heritage need to be addressed to achieve the sustainable tourism development, and responsible tourism need to be practiced. So Odisha is India's best kept secret, which need to be explored. Thank you.
Thank you, Smita. Thanks for a wonderful presentation. And I would like to say that we have Teach for India. We have collaborated with Teach for India, so we have a lot of teachers. And one thing I can say that even 10th grade has a topic in social study, which starts with sustainable development and ends with tourism. So I would say with today's presentation, or by starting this series, we have definitely got into right track with teachers, and I hope more and more people benefit from them and learn from the best practices, and those can be, I'm not saying that everything can be applied everywhere, but yes, when we learn from best practices, we can design our own system for our own region. So I would now request Brijeshwari to take up the question and answer session. Brijeshwari is our co-coordinator. She is BA in Archaeology and History of Arts from Nottingham University, UK. She has also completed her Masters in Heritage Conservation and Management from UK. She's going to be our next episode speaker also. So Brijeshwari, you can take over and see if there are any question and answer. And Jitu ji is here with us. So Brijeshwari, you can invite Mr. Jitu Mishra.
Hello, everyone. Firstly, thank you, Madhuji, for the warm introduction. And thank you, Madhura and Architect Smita Shri, for the lovely, very, very enriching presentations. I would first like to, given that you spoke about the Teach for India aspect, it would be interesting for us to firstly understand how we could connect both these presentations at a school level education. So would either of you presenters be kind enough to share your expertise on this particular topic with us? I think it would be very beneficial to all those attending.
Okay, I'll start. So I think drawing from what Madhu just mentioned about the curriculum, I think all that we are talking about are there in bits and pieces in different courses and curriculum. Though I don't know about the recent, sort of more recent changes or courses, but I think that it is, I mean, if the curriculum can be more application oriented, then it is much more helpful, because like, for example, it is school education, it is management level, everywhere I think these kinds of examples come in. So one part is what I had mentioned that we promote is heritage education. Now, heritage education is something that creates a platform for understanding, valuing, and appreciating the traditional heritage. And from there, entrepreneurial initiatives come in different ways. It can be in the form of writing, it can be in the form of photography, it can be in the form of business. But I think the orientation and awareness of the children in terms of what exists in traditional culture and how it is, and creating the value and the appreciation for it through different kinds of activities, integrating museums, integrating village artists and everything, can become a sort of step forward to create a more standardized learning tool, probably. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, I will also like to add, yeah, that now we are talking about heritage, we are talking about culture. So it is very necessary to have this from the childhood. Suppose my child, we are living in Chhattisgarh, it's very necessary for the children who are growing up here, at least know about the local culture, what is happening around, how people are living, not only urban areas, how people are living in rural areas, how people are, suppose Chhattisgarh is a tribal area, even a larger chunk of people here is a tribal, the population is quite high. So how they are surviving. So they need to have a very deep knowledge about it since their childhood. And that if it is been practiced, then only I think we can develop a sense of respect will come from our children itself, from the upcoming generation. Will have definitely have respect for each and every cultural heritage and value. So now actually the current education system, as Madhuraji now was telling, she's not aware because my daughters are now in school. So now CBSE has introduced the integration program. So through this integration program, they are integrating one state with another state. Chhattisgarh is been integrated with Gujarat. So here students, they have a compulsory activity that you have to choose some cultural heritage of Chhattisgarh and compare it with Gujarat. So in this, when the students are doing it, maybe a dance form, maybe a monument, maybe an art form, maybe their language, cuisine, anything. But it is somewhere getting printed in their mind. Somewhere they are developing the knowledge for not only one place, but two places at a time. So it is a very small approach which school is undertaken right now. And I feel these kind of approaches can definitely empower or enrich our children or enrich the future generation with this culture and heritage part. Thank you.
I think both your presentations themselves, they were so diverse in the cultural exchange and the fact that, we just have these 4 zones in as topics. It makes it very difficult because there's so much diversity, cultural diversity, that we need to kind of include in those 4 zones, right? So I think it is a big challenge, and I think cultural exchanges such as this within the country itself are a great way to incorporate that. I would also like to add in and ask that what inspired you, Dr. Madhura, this is for you, what inspired you to start this initiative, and how difficult was it? I think you mentioned that in 2004-5, when you started, there were just about 20 or so artists doing this, and how the numbers have multiplied over the past, say, 15, 16 odd years. So if you could shed some light and maybe inspire a lot of other people here to take on such initiatives as well.
Yeah, I thank you, Vijeshwari, for this very pertinent question. I think this entire dialogue of having of the, like I said, this is the International Year of Creative Industry for Creative Economy for Sustainable Development. So this whole thing around cultural assets and a cultural asset being an extremely important resource for socioeconomic development is something that has remained very limited in our dialogue in terms of policy, strategy, programs, institutions, everything. And but then if we sort of seriously try and evaluate, though we have no mapping and no data, the kind of resource that India is sitting on in terms of traditional heritage, both living and built, is very few other countries would have it. Probably I don't know whether, I mean, it would not be at this scale, and the scale is also an advantage and also a problem at the same time. But I think the fact that there is so much of economic disparity, so much of poverty and no income, and the whole understanding and concept of going to the urban places, going to the cities to get a job, even if it's a menial job, even if it's a factory job, even so, this whole thing of rural areas catering to the urban industries is something that is inbuilt in our minds, whereas tremendous skills and knowledge actually exist in the villages. I mean, if you see, for example, a natural dye maker, she actually is very conversant with chemistry, which many of us are not, because they know from where to make the natural color, how to make them. A block printer a block maker who's making a block is very conversant with measurements. If you see a weaver and the graph maker or the person who punches cards for the loom, I mean, unbelievable the kind of skill that they have. So what about those? If we can build on those, then we can really use these assets and these existing skills and knowledge and already existing resources to drive our economy. Like, we were having another sort of webinar on this a few days back, and there were two very interesting things that came about, which I would like to share. One is that we said that it is an organized industry versus unorganized industry. So we don't see it as an unorganized industry. We see it as a differently organized industry, because in a village, every home and every household and every family is engaged in that craft traditionally. It is being transferred, the skills, from generation to generation. So if you really build the resources for that village and facilitate, it's a whole village that is actually driving the local economy. So how is it not organized? So I'm saying that culturally these are sensitive issues, and I think it is important to integrate this whole thing with national policy. Like in UK, for example, they consider creative economy in their GDP. We don't. We have no priority for these sectors other than some nice traditional heritage building and craft and all that. But if we really start looking at it from the economic development angle and invest in these local cultural economies, only then I think it is possible. And because in our organization, we used to work with a range of social development issues. So this has always, so we traveled across and we worked across many other development issues. And this always sort of was in our mind, that what is it that we can do, because these resources are existing, so that we can address poverty. So that is how the whole thing came along. And we also learned in the process, failed several times, and sort of evolved this whole thing, which is a journey from 2005 to 2020. So yeah, so now we have been able to create a model.
Thank you so much. You put that beautifully. And I mean, it's like architect Smitashri ji also mentioned, that it's important for this education to kind of start at a younger age, so that it's actually valued, and the craft and the heritage can be passed on to the next generation. And it's the family's heritage and the village's heritage as well. So I think you explained that beautifully. Thank you so much. I would like to ask if there are any further questions. Please do chime in.
Hi, can I ask a question? Hello?
Of course.
Hi, I'm Gokilan here from Kuala Lumpur. I'm from ICOMOS, Malaysia. I like to ask a question. What is the involvement of local people, which is the villagers and the tribal people, when it comes to promoting their culture abroad? Meaning, are they involved in virtual experience? Are they promoting their way of life through virtual tourism kind of activity, so they can earn directly? What is the arrangement for them to popularize, not to popularize, but to promote their culture abroad? Please advise. Thank you.
I think that question is directed to you, Dr. Madhura. I'm assuming.
I think, first of all, in our entire model, community is the front runner. So we are not in the business of tourism or craft or anything. So we build their capacities for them to be able to directly connect with the markets, be it a performing art, be it music, be it craft, anything. And we have also, this has been, as I presented, this has also been a very important part, that global collaborations are brought into the process of developing those as cultural tourism destinations, because that is what builds that entire, it is like unifying with the international creative community. And that becomes very important for development. So most of the artists for Bengal, we have seen that from each and every village, and especially women, have traveled across the world, and they have traveled not only to participate in exhibitions, but also to teach. So they have gone to institutions and universities to teach people on their traditional craft and art. And because the whole methodology that we follow is very, very participatory, and community is participating and leading in each and every phase of the process, the branding and the promotion is also sort of developed in a way that the community is able to communicate the value of their culture. What happens is when we had started, the community had no interest in their own craft or art or heritage, because they did not think that that could give them anything back. But once that pride was created, once they understood the value of their own heritage, they are much more evolved to talk about their own heritage and their own thing. So earlier, obviously, when travels and everything were open, they traveled across the world and they built their own connections and own linkages. And we have seen that they have their one-to-one linkage with lots of partners, lots of musicians, buyers, etc. And during the this lockdown phase and the 2020 phase, mostly, they have been able to connect with the world through the technology. So they have been on Zoom demonstrating their art or taking workshops. They have collaborated with artists. They have gone live on Facebook. And they have been doing all those things. And we have definitely been there to facilitate some of the processes for capacity building. But it has been extremely important that they are directly connected to the world and they are being able to carry forward their own activities and business on their own. So that has been the main basis of the model.
Thank you so much, Dr. Madhura. I think it's a great way to kind of make the community self-sufficient and to also promote and kind of link sustainable development with tourism, as you mentioned in your presentation as well. And that brings me to a question that one of our participants has here, asking if there are any infrastructure developments for tourists in these villages from the outside, or the villagers, have they developed them on their own? So I think that question is directed to you as well. So if you could shed some light again on the topic.
Yeah. So this is, I think, is an extremely pertinent question. So as I said, that when we were building the whole process, we did not have tourism in mind really, and we are not tourism specialists. But then we realized that infrastructure is very weak and poor. So a very important component of which I did not harp on so much in the process is collaborating with different stakeholders. So the local panchayat or the municipality is involved, the different government departments bringing in different schemes for different infrastructure development are involved. And there is a continuous effort to mobilize those schemes to build infrastructure. So if it is in terms of roads, and in terms of water, in terms of electricity, in terms of, then there are these schemes that come into play, and the local panchayats, municipalities, district administration comes into play. And in our case, for all the villages, we've been able to develop folk art resource centers, which are physical spaces with rooms, a few rooms where people can stay, and with proper sanitation and proper sort of staying facilities, and homestay has also become popular now, because these tourists have started coming, and the artists have already learned the ways of tourism, and they have also adapted to those things. So there are even individual artists who have created small museums in their homes. So you can go and live with them. Many artists do, many urban artists do. But the other interesting thing is that when Incredible India came in as a partner to do this campaign, at that time, what is most needed, what they did was, it was fantastic that they brought in their tour operators in the process. So the tour operators became the voice for promoting these cultural destinations, and all these places are already tourism destinations to some extent. Like, there are people who go to Shantiniketan, and many of the villages I'm talking about are around Shantiniketan in a distance of probably 1 hour. Many tourists go to Purulia for adventure tourism, but they did not know that there is a cultural tourism that exists. So when the mainstream tour operators have come in, their facilities have come in and has got integrated with these tourism destinations. So that way, it has been a combination of stakeholder participation to build the proper infrastructure for tourism. Yeah.
Thank you. I think it's like you said that, you have this knock-on effect that happens once you start something. And definitely the homestay aspect would be a great way for experiential tourism to grow in the towns and villages as well. And we don't have any more questions, but we do have Jeetu Ji with us here as well. I'd like to request him if he would.
My question also has a second part. So it also asks, my question, there is another question from me. This is Anjani. So the question continues, does it match with the vernacular lifestyle, the infrastructure development that has happened in those villages? Or it is according to the lifestyle of the visitors? I mean, whom it aims, like how it reacts to this. Tourism.
So I think this is a very important part of our promotion, that you don't expect certain things when you go to these villages. So then you have a certain mindset of a particular kind of tourism. So it will not fit in with the expectations of all the tourists. So there are places where the way those are promoted are, you can always go and come back when you are going from the urban places. If you stay, then it is very transparent and very open as to what kind of accommodations and what kind of facilities exist, so that the tourists are aware what they are opting for. So there are some places where there are local partners who have created cottages, who have built the infrastructure completely in their own ways. And there are places where the infrastructure is what the villagers have developed on their own. So the folk art centers are linked to the culture of the village. The folk art centers we have built jointly, which also has space and rooms and where workshops can happen. Museum is there, which is a partnership kind of a thing, and now the communities own them. But other facilities, it has a lot to do with what already exists in mainstream tourism and what you can expect if you go to such a place. So we have by infrastructure, I mean road, water, sanitation, things like that. I don't mean building and hotels. So those are taken care by the local youth entrepreneurs, by the local people who come in, and they develop on their own when they see the lucrativeness of the industry.
Thank you so much. And we do have another question saying that how do we get information about these villagers and services? Any one-stop center? So I'm assuming this is there on your website, Dr. Madhura, and I think at the end of the presentation you have shared the website. If you could also just kindly share it on the chat box.
Yeah.
Brajeshwari, give a minute to Jeetu Ji also to explain his project, because he's also working on similar lines.
Absolutely. We don't have any more questions as of now, so I would request Jeetu Ji to please share his work and expertise with us as well, please.
Hi, thank you everyone to invite me. It is a great privilege for me to present what we do in Odisha. So we have a LLP farm called Sarana Education and Cultural Services, and the whole objective is to bring to impact on the life of the indigenous communities in Kandhamar district of Odisha, which is a tribal dominant district. It's part of the Eastern Ghat mountain range, and from for a very long time, a lot of people, because of so many factors like the climate change, and then on exploitation of the mm, consumerism and a lot of things, like a lot of people have started migrating out from their villages, and they live very miserably in big cities and towns, including Bhubaneswar. So, and if you go there, I felt, for last 1.5 years, I've been going there, and I felt that, lot of can be done through tourism, sustainable tourism. So we have, just initiated, we have taken 2 trips, for 3 nights, 4 days, where they get an immersive experience. Of course, there are no good staying facilities at the present. We are developing a small travelers home kind of thing, which was, which was a NGO once upon a time, and that had already gone into dilapidated state. So we are developing it as a place to stay, in a very basic manner, and then uh, they get to live with the community and understand their agricultural practices, and then they also explore the natural beauty of the region, and then they get chance to eat with them, and also listen to their history, their stories and all. And that is one thing what we are trying to do. And secondly, we have also opened up recently the Satkosia Gorge, which is one of the incredibly beautiful places in Odisha, where the river Mahanadi flows through almost for 22 kilometers in the form of a gorge. And so a lot of tourists go there, but if you look at the condition of the people, on the bank of the river, very, very miserable. They do not have the adequate 21st century skills, and no hospitality. Illiteracy is also rampant. So all these factors have contributed to the lifestyle. And we have just started where we take them, travelers, and we just take them there and make them connected, listen to the stories, and also arrange the food with them. And this is just the beginning. And then slowly, what we are trying to do, we try to develop the soft skills, and also, with the we are now till now we are self-funded. We are actually looking for some funding so that we can actually, empower them in skill development. And secondly, uh, also create facilities to stay, because not much luxury, just basic facilities to stay, and create some sort of training program for them, so that they can become tour guides, they can become like trekking or hiking guides, and so these kind of things, or they can keep their guests in their homes, and in a better hygienic conditions. So these are the things which we are trying to do. So we have a video channel in YouTube where we are trying to document the every trip we organize, and the stories, and just started. So this is what we do, and it is just started. I think we will have to wait for another 1 year to see how things work. So this is what I have to share. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Jeetuji, and we wish you all the very best for all these exciting ventures that you are taking on. And I would like to conclude today's presentation with that. And, thank you to both our speakers for such a lovely session. And we hope to join you next Saturday. That's the 30th of Jan for the Northeast and West India session. And a thank you to ICOMOS and Teach for India as well for organizing and giving everyone such a good platform and such a good mode to hear these enriching talks as well. So a big thank you to everyone. And Madhuji, I will give it to you for any other closing remarks in case I've missed anything out.
So thank you, Rajeshwari. Thank you to all the viewers. Thank you to our speakers. Thanks to ICOMOS India and ICOMOS from different parts of the world. You really made a beautiful world for us today. And I hope to see more active participation in the next session. I hope we all together make it a really incredible India on this platform too. So we'll close here. Thank you. Namaste. Good night and good day based on your geographical location. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madhuji. Thank you.
Thank you, Vedha Kumar ji.